Have you ever had one of those nights? The kind where the air feels heavy and every shadow seems to stretch a little too long? I've had more than my share. For years, I was the voice in the dark for a small radio station just outside Nairobi. My shift? Midnight to 4 a.m. The graveyard shift, they called it. And for good reason. Most calls were from the usual suspects. Lonely truckers, heartbroken students, or the occasional drunk guy requesting a song he couldn't remember the name of. It was a strange little community, bound together by insomnia and the glow of the radio dial. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for the call I got one Tuesday night. Or maybe it was early Wednesday morning. The clock on the studio wall read 2:47 a.m. The phone rang, not with the usual cheerful chirp, but a hesitant, almost shy ring. I picked it up, expecting another late-night rambler. "You're on the air with Alex," I said, my voice smooth from years of practice. For a moment, there was just static, a thick crackling sound like frying bacon. I was about to hang up, thinking it was a bad connection, when a voice cut through. A woman's voice. It was so faint, so fragile, it felt like it could shatter at any moment. "Please," she whispered, and the single word was laced with a terror so profound it made the hairs on my arms stand up. The static swirled around her voice, almost swallowing it whole. "He's in the house." My professional radio host persona vanished in an instant. This wasn't a prank. The fear in her voice was too real, too raw. I leaned forward, pressing the receiver hard against my ear. "Ma'am, stay calm. Can you tell me where you are? What's your address?" I tried to keep my own voice steady, a beacon of calm in her storm. But the line was a mess. Her words came in broken fragments, eaten by the static. "Don't know. Followed me." I could hear her ragged breathing, punctuated by tiny, terrified sobs. And then underneath it all another sound, a low, rhythmic sound. It took me a second to place it. It was breathing, a man's breathing. Heavy, close. My blood ran cold. I was no longer just a host. I was a lifeline, and it was fraying with every passing second. I kept trying to get information, anything I could pass on to the police. "Ma'am, can you hide? Is there somewhere you can go?" The static roared back, a wave of digital noise. Then a sickening thud. Not loud, but heavy. The kind of sound that resonates deep in your bones. After the thud, silence. Not just the absence of her voice, but the absence of everything. The frantic breathing, the whispers, even the man's heavy presence were gone. The line was completely dead. I was shouting into the phone now. "Hello, Mom, are you there?" Nothing. Just the hum of the studio equipment around me. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I felt completely helpless, a ghost listening to another ghost. And then, just as I was about to slam the phone down and call the police myself, the line cleared. For one single crystal-clear second, the static vanished completely. It was as if the world held its breath. And in that pristine silence, her voice came through, no longer whispering, but speaking with a chilling, calm finality. She said, "He's standing right behind you." Time stopped. Every muscle in my body froze. The words hung in the air of the tiny, soundproofed room. Behind me? I was alone. I'd been alone all night. But the conviction in her voice, as it was absolute, it wasn't a warning, it was a statement of fact. My mind screamed at me not to, but I couldn't help it. My body moved on its own. I spun my chair around so fast I nearly fell out of it. My eyes darted into every corner of the dark studio. Nothing. Just the familiar stacks of CDs, the dusty mixing board, and the faint glow from the city lights filtering through the single high window. And the one thing that seemed to be mocking me, the blinking red on-air light. A silent, pulsing heartbeat in the empty room. My own breath was coming in ragged gasps. A prank. It had to be a prank. Some sick kids with a soundboard and a twisted sense of humor. Anger started to replace the fear. I slammed the phone down, ending the call, my hands shaking. I needed to see the number to report it, but when I looked at the caller ID display, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a private number. It wasn't an unknown number. The screen was just blank, empty, as if the call had never existed at all. For the next 30 minutes, I tried to pretend it didn't happen. I put on a long, soulful jazz track and tried to regulate my breathing. I told myself it was the late hour, the isolation, my imagination running wild. But every creak of the old building, every flicker of the lights, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Then, the other line lit up. The emergency line, the direct link to the local police precinct, a phone that rang maybe once or twice a year. My hand trembled as I answered it. It was a sergeant I knew, a guy named Kamau. His voice was grim. "Alex, did you get any strange calls tonight? About half an hour ago?" My throat was dry. Yeah, I did. A woman said someone was in her house. I could hear the shuffling of papers on his end. "We found a car wreck on the highway just past the old quarry," he said, his voice low. "A single vehicle. The driver was a woman. She didn't make it." He paused. "We're trying to piece together her last moments." Her phone was still in her hand, the call log open. "Her last outgoing call was at 2:47 a.m. to your station." The same time, the same voice. My mind was reeling, trying to connect the dots. She had called me from the wreck, but that didn't make sense. The thud, the man's breathing. "He's standing right behind you." None of it fit. And then Kamau delivered the final, impossible piece of the puzzle. The part that still keeps me awake all these years later. "Here's the thing, Alex," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The coroner's preliminary estimate. The wreck happened at least an hour before she made that call." An hour before. She was already gone when she called me. The thought was so absurd, so horrifying, it felt like my brain was short-circuiting. How could a dead woman make a phone call? How could she describe a man in her house when she was in a mangled car on the side of a highway? And that final, chilling message, who was it for? Or what was it for? I never went back to that midnight slot. I switched to the morning show, surrounded by cheerful music and the rising sun. But I never forgot. Sometimes, even now, when I'm listening to the radio late at night, in the quiet spaces between songs, I hear it. A faint whisper, tangled in the static. A voice barely there, still trying to break through, still trying to call for help from somewhere beyond the silence. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have any of your own chilling encounters, I'd love to read them in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more strange tales from the airwaves. Stay safe out there. My grandmother's house had one very simple, very firm rule: never ever answer a knock after midnight. When I was 12, spending the summer with her, I brushed it off. It just sounded like one of her old superstitions, another folksy tale from a woman who saw spirits in the rustling leaves and omens in the flight of birds. But that summer, I learned the chilling truth behind her words. Her house wasn't just a home. It was a fortress perched right on the edge of a slowly dying village in northern Ghana. The walls were a roadmap of cracks, and the air at night was thick with a symphony of nature, the drone of cicadas, the deep croak of frogs, the sigh of the wind through the tall grass. It was a chorus of whispers that felt ancient and alive. One sweltering night, long after the last embers in the cooking fire had turned to ash and the house had fallen silent, I was jolted awake. It wasn't a loud noise, but a faint, persistent one. Tap, tap, tap. It was close. Too close. My heart hammered against my ribs when I realized it wasn't coming from the heavy wooden front door. It was coming from the window right beside my bed. The thin glass seemed to vibrate with each gentle, deliberate knock. For a long moment I just lay there, frozen under my thin blanket, every muscle tensed. My grandmother's warning echoed in my mind, a low, ominous hum. But I was 12. Curiosity, that reckless and powerful force of childhood, began to wrestle with my fear, and curiosity was winning. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else over the frantic beat of my own heart. Silence. The knocking had stopped. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was a branch scraping against the glass, caught in a sudden breeze. I was just about to roll over and dismiss it when I heard it. A low, guttural breath from the other side of the window. It was slow, rhythmic, and undeniably human. A wave of relief washed over me, followed by a surge of annoyance. It had to be my cousin, Kofi. He was always pulling pranks, trying to scare me. He thought it was hilarious that the city boy was afraid of the dark. Well, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a scream. I was going to play his game. Leaning closer to the window, my voice barely a whisper, I asked, "Who's there?" The breathing stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath with me. I waited. Nothing. "All right, Kofi, you want to play games? I'll play." A mischievous grin spread across my face. I decided to knock back. I raised my knuckles to the cool glass and mimicked the sound I'd heard. 3 soft taps. Tap, tap, tap. I leaned back, smug, waiting for him to giggle or run off. But the reply didn't come from the window. The reply came from inside the room, from behind me. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was sharp, dry, echoing from the wall near the corner of the room. Every hair on my body stood on end. My blood ran cold. Slowly, ever so slowly, I forced myself to turn. The room was bathed in the weak, silvery light of the moon filtering through the window, casting long, distorted shadows. My eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the shapes in the gloom. The wardrobe, the small wooden chair, the tall, dark figure standing in the corner. It was perfectly still. A column of pure blackness that seemed to suck the very light out of the air around it. My rational mind desperately tried to explain it away. It's just a shadow, a trick of the light. The wardrobe is casting a weird shape. But the wardrobe was on the other side of the room. Then it moved. It wasn't a sudden lurch or a step. It was a slow, sickening motion. Its head, a featureless orb of darkness, began to tilt. It tilted further and further, in a way that defied all anatomy until it was nearly upside down, as if studying me from a completely alien perspective. A scream was building in my throat, a primal, terrified sound, but it was trapped. My voice was gone, stolen by the absolute horror of what I was seeing. I was paralyzed, a spectator to my own nightmare. And then, the creature, the shadow, it raised an impossibly long arm. It knocked on the interior wall 3 times, the same 3 knocks I had just made on the window. Tap, tap, tap. It was an answer, an invitation accepted. The sound shattered the spell. Suddenly, the door to my room burst open with a crash. My grandmother stood silhouetted in the doorway, a small clay bowl in her hands. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were locked on the corner of the room. She was chanting, a string of words in her native tongue that I didn't understand but felt in my bones, a powerful ancient prayer. As she spoke, she began to sprinkle the contents of the bowl, a fine grey powder that looked like ashes, into the room. She threw handfuls into the air toward the corner where the figure stood. Where the ashes touched the air, they seemed to hiss, like water on a hot stone. The shadow recoiled. It didn't run or fade. It seemed to dissolve, melting backward into the deeper darkness, folding into itself, until it was nothing. My grandmother rushed to my side, her hands trembling as she pulled me into a fierce hug. She kept chanting, her voice a low, soothing murmur now, rocking me back and forth as my own voice finally returned in a torrent of choked, terrified sobs. I couldn't stop shaking. She held me until the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, chasing away the last of the oppressive shadows. The next morning, sitting outside under the warm sun that felt like a blessing, she finally told me the truth. Her voice was low and serious, all traces of the superstitious old woman gone. She explained that the village, and her house specifically, stood on land that was once a grave boundary, a place where the worlds of the living and the dead were thin. She told me about the restless ones, the spirits who felt they were wronged or had unfinished business. They couldn't just cross over. They needed an invitation. They would test the boundaries, searching for a way in, for someone foolish enough to acknowledge them. And they always started by knocking. My 3 playful taps on the window hadn't been a joke. They had been a reply, an invitation. "You knocked back," she said, her eyes filled with a sorrow and fear that chilled me more than the memory of the creature itself. "You invited it in." She explained that the ashes were from sacred herbs, the only thing that could repel them once they had been acknowledged. I left my grandmother's house a week later, but a part of me never really left that room. The experience carved something deep inside me. It changed the way I see the world, the way I listen to the night. The memory of that tilting head, that unnatural movement in the dark, is seared into my mind. It's a brand of fear that never fades. Even now, years later, living in a modern city apartment high above the ground, the sound of a late-night knock sends a jolt of pure, primal terror through me. Whether it's a delivery person, a neighbor, or just the building settling, my heart stops. Because I know what can be waiting on the other side of a door or a window. I know what it means to give an invitation. And that's why to this day I will never ever answer a knock after midnight. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have a chilling tale of your own, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more strange and unsettling stories. Stay safe and be careful who you answer the door to. For years, my job as an architectural surveyor was pretty straightforward. I'd map out old colonial hotels, getting them ready for restoration. It was a job about precision, about bringing the past into the present. But then I was assigned to the Bayview Manor. This place was different. It was a crumbling shell on a windswept cliff, abandoned since the 1970s. The wind howled through its broken windows like a forgotten ghost. Our task was to document all 23 rooms before the demolition crew moved in. Simple enough, right? That's what I thought too. I set up my gear in the grand, decaying lobby. Dust motes danced in the slivers of afternoon light, and the silence was so thick you could almost touch it. My laser scanner methodically hummed, mapping every wall, every doorway, every inch of decay. I worked my way up floor by floor. The first floor was a mess of collapsed ceilings and graffiti. The second floor was even worse, with water damage that had warped the floorboards into a treacherous landscape. It was on the third floor, at the end of a long, dark corridor, that things started to feel off. The air grew colder, and a strange stillness settled around me. According to the original blueprints, this wing had rooms 210 through 216. 7 rooms. But my scanner was picking up something else, a discrepancy, an anomaly. I checked the blueprints again, then looked at my digital floor plan. The blueprints showed 23 rooms in total, but my scanner, my meticulously calibrated, never-wrong scanner, had mapped 24. A phantom room. Tucked away right next to room 216 was a space the building's own records swore didn't exist, room 217. On my screen, it was just a solid rectangle, but on the wall in front of me, where the door to this ghost room should have been, there was nothing. Just faded, peeling wallpaper patterned with once elegant fleur-de-lis. I walked over, my footsteps echoing unnaturally in the corridor. I ran my hand over the wall. It felt solid, brick and plaster, just like the rest of the building, but my gut told me otherwise. Driven by a curiosity I couldn't explain, I knocked on the wall. Thud, thud, thud. Solid. I moved a few feet to the left and knocked again, and that's when I heard it. A hollow echo, a sound that shouldn't have been there. My heart started to pound in my chest. I pressed my ear against the wallpaper, listening. Silence. I tapped it again, harder this time. The plaster, brittle with age, cracked under my knuckles. A spiderweb of fissures spread across the wall. I pushed and a chunk of plaster crumbled away, revealing something dark underneath. Old, dark wood. A door. An actual physical door, hidden for who knows how long. There was no handle, no keyhole, just a simple wooden frame sealed behind a wall of lies. Looking back, I can't tell you what possessed me to open it. Maybe it was the surveyor in me, needing to document the undocumented. Or maybe it was something else, a whisper from the hotel itself, daring me to look. I wedged my fingers into the crack and pulled. With a groan of splintering wood and a sigh of ancient dust, the hidden door swung inward. The air that rushed out was freezing, a pocket of winter in the musty summer heat. It carried a strange, cloying scent, the sweet smell of old perfume mixed with something else, something like decay. I hesitated for a moment, a primal fear screaming at me to turn back, to seal the wall and pretend I'd never seen it. But I didn't. I stepped inside. The room was a time capsule. It was a perfectly preserved hotel suite from the 1950s. The bed was neatly made, a heavy damask coverlet pulled taut. A vintage radio on a mahogany dresser hummed with a soft, static-filled tune. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, plunging the room into a deep twilight. It felt occupied, as if someone had just stepped out and would be back any minute. My eyes were drawn to the nightstand. Next to a glass of water that had long since evaporated, sat a leather-bound guest book. I picked it up, the leather cool and smooth beneath my fingers. I flipped through the pages, all empty until the very last one. The handwriting was elegant, a looping cursive from a bygone era. The entry was dated June 7th, 1958. It read, "If anyone finds this, I never checked out." There was no name, just those chilling words. A shiver ran down my spine. I had seen enough. This was beyond architectural surveying. This was something else entirely. I turned to leave, to get back to the world of blueprints and solid walls, but the doorway was gone. Where the old wooden door had been, there was now just a seamless wall of faded wallpaper. I was trapped. Panic set in. I banged on the wall, my fists hitting solid plaster. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" My voice was swallowed by the room's suffocating silence. Then the radio clicked. The soft humming stopped, and a voice crackled through the speaker. It was faint, old-fashioned, and filled with a chilling intimacy. It said, "You shouldn't have come back. The rest is a blur." I remember screaming. I remember the walls feeling like they were closing in. I remember the scent of perfume getting stronger until I couldn't breathe. The next thing I knew, I was being shaken awake by one of the crew. I was lying on the dusty floor of the corridor, right where the wall had been. There was no door, no hidden room, just solid brick and peeling wallpaper. The scanner now showed only 23 rooms. They thought I'd fainted from the heat or the dust. But when I got back to my office and played back my personal audio recorder, which I'd left running, my blood ran cold. Amongst hours of static, there was a sound I hadn't made. A single whispered word repeated over and over again like a lullaby from hell. Stay. Thanks for listening to my story. If you want to hear more chilling tales from the edge of reality, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You never know what you might find when you look behind the walls.